about to start researching your family tree and not quite sure where to start? Maybe I can help. So in this week's episode, I'm going to share with you 10 things that I wish I'd have known when I started researching my family tree. Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Dr Michala Hulme and I'm a historian and genealogist. In today's video, I'm going to be talking to you about 10 things I wish I'd have known when I'd started my family tree. Number 1. So my first point, which may seem obvious, is make sure that you've got an effective system to record down your data, your research. I didn't. So at the beginning, I was using post-it notes. I think I used a newspaper at one point, wrote around the article. I think I used a cover of Vogue once, this is true, to make notes on. Don't do that, because in 5 or 10 years time, when you want to go back and revisit the research, you will find you've probably binned that cover of Vogue, that newspaper, all those post-it notes. So just don't do that. Don't make that mistake. I have made that mistake for you. Point number 2. You are going to have to connect with the living. I know. I spend 90% of my time as a historian and genealogist researching people that have died. This is the only bit where you're probably going to really be researching the living. So what you're going to want to do is make contact with those relatives that have probably sent you a Christmas card down the year that you've not replied to. You need to connect with those people. I am going to do a video specifically on, this is what we call in the business oral history, and how to approach oral history when it comes to family members and what questions to ask them and what recording devices to use. I am going to do a video on that, so hold fire. If you have any specific questions, pop them in the comments below and I will try and answer them for you. But you are going to need to reconnect with your relatives, your living relatives, and you want to know as much information as what they know about your family. Now, it may seem trivial. It may just be that Auntie June remembers that in 1960 they lived on a road called Rice Lane, and she remembers that because she likes rice pudding. That may seem trivial right now, however, trust me when I say you will use that information. Number 3. Contrary to what you may think, you don't need to go out straight away and pay for a rather expensive subscription to one of the genealogical search engines or websites. You don't need to do that. If you're in the UK, most libraries actually will give you access to these websites for free, so you don't need to pay for anything. I'm a massive fan, especially when you're starting out, of using the local library, because often if you go to one of the bigger libraries, they're also going to have local genealogical friend societies that will be there, that will be able to help you with your research if you get a bit stuck. So what I would say is don't rush out straight away and go and sign up for an expensive genealogical website when you can probably just use your library card here in the UK and get access for free. Now, I know it's not as convenient. It's far better if you can just access it from home, but if you have good transportation links, it's also a good excuse to get you used to working in a library and archive environment. Point number 4. When you are searching for your ancestors, please be careful if you see a family tree out there and you kind of think it looks like yours. I have done this, so I have made these mistakes for you so you don't have to make them. I was on one of my favourite search engines and there was already a family tree on there, and I thought it married up. There was a couple of people that kind of married up with my family tree, so I connected I based basically my whole family tree around this person's family tree, because I thought, they've already done it. They've probably spent years doing it. They've probably spent loads of money on certificates that they didn't need. So I did that and I connected my family tree to it, only to find out further down the line that it was completely wrong. They had gone up a different line. with a similar surname, and it wasn't my family tree at all. And in fact, their research wasn't great, and it wasn't actually their family either. But we won't tell them that. So don't do that. If you see family trees that have already been made and they're already on the internet, use them as a guide. Do not take them as gospel, just use them as a guide. Trust me, it will save you a lot of heartache and research hours in the long run. Number 5. So my next point is that your ancestors, especially if you were in the 19th century, probably have no idea how old they are, like zilch idea of how old they are. I had one ancestor who was 9 years out. Yes, 9 years. And I think that's probably because they were pretty lazy. So when the enumerator came round to the house and popped in and said, right, okay, we need to fill out the census. How old are you? I imagine my ancestor probably looked at his wife and said, how old are you? And she just plucked out an age, and he said, that'll do. I'll just put myself 1 year above you. He had no idea how old he was. And in fact, most of my ancestors, most of my Victorian ancestors, have literally no idea how old they are. So it is worth bearing that in mind when you are doing your research. Don't be really rigid on ages, because you may find, and it's normally when you're getting towards looking for a death of that person, that their age was well out, like 9 years out. 6. So my next point kind of feeds onto the point that I've just spoke about, as in, not only do your ancestors have no idea how old they are, they also have no idea how to spell their name. And often when the enumerator would come round, he would just spell it how it sounded. So that means that we have real variations in how names are spelled. That, and also don't forget, a lot of our Victorian ancestors, especially if they're working class, would have been illiterate. Because in Britain, there wasn't really any form of education, or should I say no education system, until the second half of the 19th century. So if your ancestor fell before that period, the chances are they'd had little in a way of education unless they attended a Sunday school. So it's worth bearing in mind that when you're on and you're doing your research, tick that box that gives you variation in the spelling, because it can change quite wildly. Oh, and if you like my channel and you found any of this information interesting or useful, please like and subscribe. Details are below. Thank you. Number 7. As well as name changes, it's also worth noting that locations and street names also change. So I recommend going online and having a look at some old maps, because if you are going there in person, you may want to check that the street is still there, or the name hasn't changed since when your ancestors lived there. Another little tip, if you are looking to know a bit more about your ancestors' houses and how big the houses were, try and do an address search on the 1911 census. One of the genealogical sites, which is Find My Past, actually have that facility available, so you can search by address. If you put any address into that 1911 census search, it will tell you how many rooms your ancestors have. So check maps, maybe also have a look on the 1911 census. It will give you some idea of whether your ancestors lived in a mansion or whether they lived in a 2-up, 2-down terrace. Point number 8. So my next point is, don't be afraid to use newspapers in your research. I think a lot of the time when we're starting out, we tend to focus on the biggies: birth, marriages and deaths, parish records, census records. But what I will say is, don't be afraid to use newspapers. That is where you get all the kind of really interesting, juicy stories on your ancestors. You know, were they a bigamist? Did they commit a crime? Were they successful in business? Did a murder happen on their road? Did they live next door to Charlie Chaplin? Who knows? It may be in the newspaper. Have a look. Point number 9. You may find when you do your research that you don't have every single record for your ancestor. For example, you may find you can't find a World War I record for your ancestor. That is okay. Not all the records are there. Some were destroyed in subsequent wars. If your ancestors are Irish, you may find that some of their records were destroyed in a fire, or their records are still with the parish. So it is normal. You are not going to find every single record for your ancestor, and that is no knock on your researching. It's just because those records aren't available. Point number 10. So this is my last point, and what I will say is at some point you are going to hit a brick wall, and that brick wall may take you a week to get through. It may take you a year. What I will say is if you do hit a brick wall, don't be afraid to ask for help. Reach out to family history societies and maybe even ask a genealogist, but do ask for help. I really hope you have enjoyed today's video, and I hope it has given you some things to think about. Please, if you like this video, please like and subscribe to my channel. I've got loads of genealogy stuff, videos I'm going to be releasing over the next few weeks. So if you like it, please subscribe, and hopefully I shall see you back very, very soon. Thanks for watching.